Welcome to Pastor's Chat today. Well, today we start on the letter to the fourth church here in Revelations chapter 2, verse 18. And to the angel of the church in Thyatira write, These things says the Son of God, who has eyes like a flame of fire and his feet like fine brass. I know your works, love, service, faith, and your patience. And as for your works, the last are more than the first. Nevertheless, I have a few things against you, because you allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit sexual immorality and to eat things sacrificed to idols. And I gave her time to repent of her sexual immorality, and she did not repent. Indeed, I will cast her into a sick bed, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation, unless they repent of their deeds. I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am he who searches the minds and hearts, and I'll give to each one of you according to your works. Now, some really interesting things in this letter to the church of Thyatira is, again, the Lord starts off this letter with words of approval. Now, the church at Ephesus was a careless church, and remember, the church at Smyrna was the crown church, and the church of Pergamos was the compromising church. Well, the church of Thyatira was the corrupted church. Had a prophetess there named Jezebel. Well, that probably wasn't her real name. It was a symbolic name of her deeds, connecting her to Jezebel in the Old Testament, who was the wicked, evil wife of Ahab, who brought the worship of Baal, the worship of idolatry, the worship of sexual immorality into the nation of Israel. Wicked, wicked queen that God had to judge. And here, this lady is being called Jezebel by God, and she is doing the same thing to the church of Thyatira. Now, Jesus shows up here as he says the Son of God. It's interesting that the longest message to the church was sent to the church in the smallest city. And Thyatira was a military town as well as a commercial city. And there it had a great special temple to Apollos, who was the sun god. And that's probably why the Lord introduced himself as the Son of God, the only time this title is used in the entire book of Revelation. And John had to give a message of severe warning and judgment to this congregation. And that's why he says he has eyes like a flame of fire. I mean, he sees through the sins. He sees through the hypocrisy of the people. And he also has his feet like fine brass. Brass is always symbolic of judgment in the Bible. And so he comes to judge. He comes to see those things that should not be in that church. And then he says, I know your works, your love, your service, your faith, your patience, and as for your works, the last are more than the first. And so just like the church of Ephesus, it had some really good things going on. Some great things going on. Now, what's interesting about this church here, its works were increasing in love and grace and all the things, patience that went with it. The last are more than the first. Remember the church at Ephesus? He said, I have somewhat against you, you left your first love. But the church at Ephesus was the ones that was dealing with the false prophets and the false teachers, but the church at Thyatira was allowing this prophetess to teach these things of immorality and also idolatry. Now, there are two sins that plagued the nation of Israel in the wilderness and literally their entire history, and that was the sin of idolatry, letting other gods come in to be worshipped like Baal and Moloch and all these other gods of the pagans around them. They learned the worship of other gods. And then the sin of sexual immorality. You know, I'm afraid that is exactly what has happened in the church today. We've allowed sins of sexual immorality. There is so much happening in our churches, even across America today. You hear it every day, another pastor falling, another church going down the drain because of immorality in the church that's destroyed the church. May God help us to understand these are sins that destroy the flesh and destroy families and destroy the church. And so here, this stern warning, he has eyes like a flame of fire and he has feet like brass. the Lord is still looking at His church. He's still looking at my heart, your heart, and we need to make sure our hearts are clean before Him. Well, I'm looking forward to explaining some more things about this church and the letter that the Apostle John wrote to it, and I believe God's going to speak to our hearts. Well, God bless, and you have a wonderful, wonderful day.